You are listening to the Neustreet X podcast, where we interview people who understand the intersection of physical and digital collectibles. We're entering an exciting world in the collectible space that involves things like sneakers, NFTs, trading cards, fashion, sports, pop culture, and much, much more. And these things are coming together. So we're here to talk to people that understand that, people that are really building the future of collectibles around the world. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Neustreet X podcast. I'm excited to have here today a special guest, Tayyab Salami. He is the founder of House of Kicks. He's been writing about the sneaker world for many years now, about the sneaker business, about what shoes are worth buying, not worth buying, the industry more broadly speaking, what's fake, what's not. And he's just like very much a thought leader who has a lot of wisdom and experience in the world of sneakers. We're excited to have you today. Tayyab, thanks so much for being on the podcast, man.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk sneakers.
Of course. I know it's something you talk about all the time on House of Kicks, and it's something you're very passionate about. Maybe to just kick off, like, how did you start writing about sneakers? What is House of Kicks? If someone doesn't know who you are, maybe you could introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I actually started as a reseller. I wasn't really writing about sneakers in the beginning. I just I love shoes. I wanted to buy shoes and I wanted to wear them. And I was like, pretty much, I didn't have like a specific brand, so to speak, but Nike were always like ranked high in my collection. I bought shoes and things of the sort. And then in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, or 2010, or no, I take that back, probably 2011 or 2010, I met Chris Burns from Arch-USA. And he told me, listen, like, I know that you like to talk about sneakers. Your website is like a shoe store, but why don't you change and transition from being just a reseller to talking sneakers? And I first thought, well, you know what? I'm not really interested in writing about sneakers. I just want to make money. And then I took his advice and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let me start. And the rest is just what you see today. Like I really got into like writing about sneakers and doing a lot of analysis because my background is in mathematics. That's what I studied in college. So I incorporate a lot of my knowledge in math in my analysis and in my prediction on sneakers and what's going to resell and how much it's going to resell for. And then another thing that I've done was, again, thanks to Chris, at the time I had a YouTube channel and I never thought about like really doing much. I just bought some shoes and some was fake and some was authentic. And I thought, well, why don't I teach people how to authenticate these things? Like, how do I teach people how to recognize a fake shoe? So, I did this before a lot of people started that. It's like, if you look at my videos, I was one of the first ones to start the real versus fake stuff. And Chris asked me, did you monetize your videos? I'm like, monetize? I don't know about monetizing. And he told me, are you getting paid for this? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just sharing stuff. And he said, hey, you have to monetize your videos. So, so like, thanks to Chris, I've learned a lot about the whole monetizing and actually using the knowledge that I've acquired with sneakers and my mathematics background to actually help people. And not only that, but also get some capital out of it. So House of Kicks is now one of the leading websites as far as like sneaker resale and also authenticating shoes. So I do a lot of that on my website. And I also do a recommendation. For example, if you're a basketball player and I actually try on the shoe and I take them to the basketball court and I play because I love basketball. It's my passion. So I play and I test it. So I do performance review. I don't do them very often, but when I get a shoe that I like, I will take it to the court and actually play and then see how the shoe holds up on the court. And I do a lot of real versus fake. And the third one is my sneaker prediction on the resale market. So that's pretty much House of Kicks in a nutshell.
Man, I have so many questions. I've been writing it down furiously as we were talking because I feel like you've kind of touched on so many different layers and elements of the sneaker world. I'd love to get your opinion on all of them. And shout out to Chris, who's also on this podcast. And he's someone I admire in terms of what he's writing in the industry. Maybe we could like rewind for a sec and just learn about how you became a reseller. So, I mean, I think there's like a difference, right, between someone who's just a fan of shoes, loves shoes, versus realizing, damn, there's a business here, right? And I know that like resale has evolved, and I'd love to ask about that too, versus 2011 or 2009, 2010. But the first question on the resale history of yours: how did you get into resale, and also what was your strategy? Because that's one thing I'm realizing as well, right? Like, from my understanding, like if it was 10, 20 years ago, let's just say 10, it was resale was like less complicated in the sense that it was easy to just like hit a raffle and then just like resell, like, and that was pretty much it. But obviously there's different strategies. Are buy and hold, you buy in bulk, do you go in volume, do you have bots even, what's your strategy? So one, I'd love to know, how did you get into reselling? What was the story behind that? And did you have like a strategy? Like, how are you approaching making money from that business?
That's a good question. I can't really pinpoint how he started, but what I can say to you is this: back in the days, eBay was the big place. I bought some shoes off of eBay, off of auctions, and I remember how much I would pay for certain shoes, and I thought, why don't I do it myself? And my destination was not even sneaker stores. I went straight to Taiwan or Japan, and I used Yahoo Auction Taiwan, and I had a proxy service. I would buy shoes from Japan and resell them here. Especially Japan has a huge back in like those early 2000s, they still had like stuff from 2011. They still have stuff from like 2000, the Concorde, the Space Jam, the Ginger 16. So stuff like that where you can find them anywhere. So my first foot into the resale market was not really selling the newer stuff. I was selling older items that no one could find anymore. So I'll buy this from Japan and resell them for a lot of money, and that's the way I started doing the resale. And then I got involved with, I got into this place called ISS at the time. And it's like Soul Collector. They had a marketplace and you had to like apply, and then they had to like approve your account. So I got into that as well. And I started selling more because most people at the time were not really buying the latest shoes. They were buying older models. They wanted to buy the 2004 Jordan 7 Olympic. They wanted to buy the older model. So we were really, we served the community, and resellers were not hated. We were actually loved at the time. So it wasn't like, oh, I don't like resellers. It was, you like the reseller because he gave you stuff that you were looking for, you can find. They call them the grails. So that's what it was like at the time when I started selling reselling sneakers.
That's so interesting that like back in the day, back in the day, meaning like early 2000s, what reselling was focused on was, not the hottest release at the time, but like older shoes. And it's so interesting to me that like your sort of arbitrage was like Japan, Taiwan to the US. Why, can you like explain to me how that works? Right. Like I know like nowadays, and we can obviously talk about the changes too, but you have this sort of arbitrage at different levels where you could find stuff that might be selling for more or less in Europe, and then the same in the US, same in Asia. What was it about Taiwan and Japan in those days in like early 2000s? Like, why did they have more access to these older models? They were just like less desired by Japanese, Taiwanese customers. How did you spot that, and why do you think that existed? And I guess, has that changed too?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the time in Japan, for some reason, they always had brand new shoes that were not worn. And they were like, I'm like, I can't believe this. So I don't even know, I can't really pinpoint why they wouldn't wear those shoes. But one of my main destinations was K-Skit, Japan. This is a store that was pretty popular in Japan, K-Skit. So I'll look at K-Skit and I'll look at Yahoo Auction in Japan, and I'll find stuff. I'm like, I can't believe they have these shoes for like under $180. It was incredible. So, and I guess at the time there was no Facebook, and all these places were not that, I would say, popular. So you really didn't have this kind of vast, people were not really keen to where you can find shoes. Now it wouldn't happen again. Like now everybody knows. So back in those days, like these sellers did not really know how incredible what they had was. You know what I'm saying? Like they knew it was valuable, but they didn't really know the value of it. So at the time, I would be looking for stuff, and I'm like, whoa, my gosh, they have this shoe for like $180. I can return around and sell it for $450. Just like that. So I don't even know how this happened. I'm not sure why they didn't know what they had, or I guess at the time, again, you got, look, in those days, like the Concorde, when you went to 160, we were like, oh, that's expensive. Back then, I remember buying a pair of Jordan 9 from Finish Line for $130, $130. So retail was low. So even when somebody sold a shoe for 180 or 190, they still felt like that's still a lot of money, not knowing how much more this was worth within the US. So I'm not sure if I answer your question, but that's pretty much what it was like. So I would take days looking for stuff on Yahoo Taiwan, Yahoo Auction Japan. And I had two guys. I had a guy in Japan that would buy on my behalf, and I had a guy in Taiwan. I became friends with them. They would charge me sometimes $3.99 just to buy the item. And then the guy from Japan would charge me sometimes 5% or 10%. So I worked with him. So they still made some money, but I was the one actually making the most, because the shipping was not expensive, because I would buy maybe 4 or 5 pairs, and then it became cheaper when you bought more shoes. So shipping came down to like maybe 18 or 20 bucks per pair. So you still had enough money to make.
That's so wild. I mean, because like the way you describe it, like, Yahoo Auctions, you're the first person I've heard describe Yahoo Auctions as a place to buy shoes, right? And obviously resale's changed so much where, I mean, you're saying this is pre-Facebook, right? So like put aside obviously like the StockX's of the world, but what you're talking about at the time when like people couldn't even sell on like Instagram or Facebook to each other. There's so many, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure if I asked you, well, actually, let me ask you two things here. One, is it harder? Okay, actually, can I ask 3 questions? I'm just going to make sure you're bringing up so many questions here. I want to make sure I get them all out there. One, is that kind of international arbitrage still an opportunity now? Is it harder? Is it easier? Is it harder to do international arbitrage now? 2, does being a reseller require more sophistication today or more different types of skills? And 3, what are the other things you've seen in terms of how that resale market has changed? Obviously, there's a lot of things we can point to, but just love to know what you think has been super impactful. Sorry, a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, right now, to answer your first question, right now, a lot of these guys, they know what they have on hand. So you go on Yahoo Auction Japan, you don't really find those gems anymore. Even if you find them, they're either too expensive or they're pretty beat up. So you're not really gonna capitalize on that. And honestly, the new type of buyers are not looking for old items. They don't care about the 2000 Air Jordan 11 Concord. They don't want a shoe that's gonna pretty much break apart when you buy it. Like they don't care about the story behind these niggas. They just don't care. There's no nostalgia. There's no sentimental value. There's nothing. So they just want a shoe so they can wear them. So that's one thing. So that has kind of killed the market. You can find those shoes, but even those guys that are selling that now in Japan, they know how much the shoes are worth, because now everything is so broadcasted. So they know what they're selling. So you're not gonna find these super steals anymore. That's not gonna happen. That's our first one. Second, if I remember your second question, I don't think I can remember.
All good. Yeah.
This is the first one. What was
I asked a lot. I won. Sorry. The second one was like, what skills is required to be reseller now versus back then? Because something I hear, sophistication. Is it different now? Is it harder? Some strategies don't work anymore, so you got to like find other alpha.
Yeah, it's easier now to be a reseller because StockX and Good, they have pretty much leveled the ground. They are the great equalizers. In my days when I was selling shoes, you had to know what you were selling. You couldn't just get into the sneaker game being like a rookie, and you had to know what you were selling. You had to know your shoes, and it took time to put the item on eBay. 5 minutes. You had to take pictures. You had to describe it. You had to really know. Now all you have to do is just take your phone app, and just put in the style code, and the shoe populate, and you know how much it's. So there is they've leveled the ground. So no one in these days is like, oh yeah, I'm a sophisticated reseller. Now that's gone. Anybody can become a reseller. Anyone. I mean, I've seen people like I've seen like elderlies in stores buying shoes and going on their phone trying to sell shoes off of Foot Locker or the Nike outlet. So it's not sophisticated. Now, the sophistication comes when you're trying to get those items that everybody wants but nobody can get. Now, if you have a bot that's really powerful, you can get those. But again, that's not sophisticated. You don't really have to be knowledgeable. You just have to know the style code, and that's it. So gone are the days where you were the sneaker expert. You knew all the shoes names, you knew the nicknames, you know the story. Like we had every shoe that you saw, you had to know the story. So because you were invested in the shoe, and you were also invested in the market. So you had the knowledge, and you also had you just had to know what you were selling. Like people couldn't just get in and be like, well, I want to be a reseller. I mean, first you have to do your homework, and now it's gone. Like nobody cares. Recently I went to this sneaker event that was like 2 years ago. It was crazy. I mean, there were kids there that were like probably 15, 20 years younger than I am. And the stuff that they had on their tables was incredible. I'm just sitting there like, wow, like this is crazy, because these kids have bots, they have all these things, and we were the first ones to start this thing, but now we died out. Like I can't resell any sneakers anymore because it's just impossible. So you don't have to be sophisticated. If I was to answer that question now, you don't. You just have to have a phone, money, and that's it.
How about margins? Have margins tightened up though, or is it, like have profit margins increased, decreased?
Ooh, man.
Please go ahead.
There's no margins, man. Like margins are totally dead. Like out of 10 shoes that I write on my website, maybe 1 out of 10 could be profitable. And the profit, you might end up making maybe 10 to 15% as a markup, which leaves you with maybe like $15. Now, if you sell one shoe, that's not good. But if you have multiples, so margins are pretty much dead. Like, but the thing about resale is really sophisticated now. In what way? If you are smart, you can go find some still like gems in stores. Like most people want to resell just Jordans and Nikes and that, right? But a true reseller is not just bound by these quote unquote like hype items. If I can find a pair of Puma for $5 and sell that Puma for $25, I'm still considered a reseller, but not like everybody thinks. You see what I'm saying? So if you're still smart, you can still find those gems in store and still turn them around and make a lot of money if you know what you're doing. It takes time, discipline, and a lot of searching, because margins are pretty much dead, especially when it comes to Jordan retros and Nikes. It's not happening. And anybody that claims that he's making money reselling sneakers, he's either selling fakes or he's lying. Ask him to give you the record. They won't show it to you. They tell you, well, yeah, I sold it. Okay, show me the record. Nah. Nah, there's no margins. They're dead. They're like nothing. Yeah.
Well, so if you think about like the kind of stuff that you're writing about, then so you can you kind of walk me through, or any people who haven't read your website, like you talked about things like authentication, you talked about like analysis. I've seen stuff where you kind of analyze like shoes in terms of things like profitability, or like if you recommend them to be purchased or not. Can you kind of walk me through like some examples of the kind of stories you've written? And also what I'd like to add here is you mentioned like your math knowledge and your math background, which I would say is something you don't see a lot, because I think a lot of sneaker media, at least from what I can see, is people just kind of talk about, this is so sexy, look at this hot ass shoe that's on my feet. But analysis is kind of, there isn't as much of that as I'd say. So could you kind of walk me through the kind of analysis you do and how you bring math into the equation?
All right. Well, first thing is this, like I look at the calendar, the release calendar, and I go, that's about maybe 5 shoes releasing this week. So I have a full-time job, and I'm like, all right, I would love to do analysis on every single one of them, but I can't because I have to get up to go to work. So I pick the ones that I believe people will be more interested in. And then the first thing is I introduce the shoe, talk about the backstory, and then where people can buy it. And then I used to be able to actually predict how many pairs were made. I stopped doing it because it was just too much work. Because that is very, very key. Because if you know how many shoes are made, it's easy to make a better prediction. And then the next step is I collect the data on different platforms, and then I put it in the Excel spreadsheet, and then I try to see how well the shoe is doing in terms of time. Usually, the best way to make your prediction is 3 days before the shoe releases. You can pretty much know how this shoe is going to behave. whether you're going to be able to buy it or resell it or not. And then there's another thing that I do is I like to go and check to see are people actually interested in the shoe. I see the trends. Are people talking about it? So that's one thing. I usually don't put that on my thing because it requires time, but I'll do it on my own to just see, all right, this is a shoe that people are actually talking about. And then the next thing is, I find my 5-number summary to see the lowest price, highest price, any outliers, because usually outliers are really tricky. Some people, they could be a false positive. You see the prices like bumped up and people go, oh yeah, this shoe is doing great. No, that's because on that specific day, a pair sold for $400 and I happen to be a size 13 and a half, which nobody else can get. So don't let that fool you. So I get that. And then I also want to look at the data and I see what's the average selling price. If there's any outliers, I usually take the outliers out because I don't want to trick people into like buying something that they're not going to make money over. And I take the outliers out, and then I get my my average sale price. And then from there, most people are not going to sell these shoes on their own. They're going to use a platform like StockX, eBay, Go. So I take the fees out because sometimes you see that if the shoe is like 145 and then retail is like 130 and people go, well, there's still a profit. No, you got to take into consideration selling fees, shipping, and all the hassle. So when you take all those away, you're down to like no money. So you're down to like 10, 15. And then the next step is to show the potential earnings or returns or losses by size. So this is pretty much what I do. And then at the end, I make my conclusion, say, hey, listen, this is not a shoe that you want to buy. You may be interested in it, but this is not a shoe that you can immediately make money off of. Sometimes some shoes, what I do is I'll look at the data and then I'll plug it in and run some simulation to see if I can make a prediction based on 2-3 years. And then I can find some kind of model. It could be a regression line. It could be it depends on how the shoe is behaving. Sometimes you can have a quadratic model. You can have linear. You can have, it depends. So if I see that, then I can say, hey, listen, within 2-3 years, you might be able to get these shoes. You might be able to sell for 180, but you want to hold on 2 years to only make like $10. Maybe if you want to do that, that's your, So that's the kind of stuff that I bring to the table. I try to be as accurate as possible. But again, with prediction, you never know. It's just a prediction. So we try to be accurate, but we can't ever get to the truth because I'm not God. I can't see the future. So, so that's pretty much what I do. And then, I'll leave it to the buyer. Now, you make your your decision based on the data that I gave you and the information that I gave you. So that's pretty much what I do on the website as far as like the resale is concerned.
And it's interesting because, like, let's say I'm a business owner, I'm trying to be a reseller, like taking it seriously, wanting to make this my, side hustle, if not full-time job. To your point, there's only so far you can go in terms of predicting things, in terms of being quantitative about your analysis, in terms of like projecting far out. I mean, to me, like 2-3 years sounds like a lot of time, right? A lot can change. And then even think about things like, I was talking to someone earlier today. We were talking about how Taylor Swift wearing the New Balance 550s a few months ago has, like, at least New Balance was saying that they've seen an increase in search volume for the 550s and the specific colorway she was wearing. They were seeing an increase in sales price. It's interesting to me to try to kind of quantify and, from your mathematical like perspective, like what are if you were to think about resale value as a formula, and I know you kind of walk me through like a version of that, what are the sort of variables that go beyond what you just mentioned, right? Like, because I think about things like Travis Scott, right? Like, obviously some of his shoes are the most hyped. Part of that's based on limited supply, also based on his persona in the world. They are, if I was a reseller, I'd love to get my hands on Travis Scott shoes. Probably I can get less volume of it than getting some Pandas, but there's still like obviously profit there. How do you think through the sort of stuff that's harder to quantify, or can you quantify? If a pair of Travis Scott shoes were coming out, would you like kind of quantify that? Just trying to think like what's the limitation to quantifiability in terms of something's resale value or hype, so to speak.
Well, it's a lot of things because sometimes, like you say, because Taylor Swift wears something and then all of a sudden it becomes a hot product, a hot commodity. You know, things like that happen. You know, it happened with the Crocs where nobody cared about Crocs until, I don't know, I think is that the guy from Florida, somebody wore them and then all of a sudden it took off. You know, so at this point in the market, a rule of thumb, any general release is dead. Don't even think about it. Anything that's like general release retro, do not try to sell it. I don't even know why I write those articles because I feel like it's a waste of time, but people don't listen. You know, anything that's general release, don't even try to sell it. So that's just to me, like, I don't care how many pairs they made, just don't even try to sell it. Now, as far as like the Travis Scott, those are the stuff that, you know, only a few are going to be able to get their hands on that. So that's automatic. You don't even have to think twice. Now, certain silhouettes are still pretty good. The Jordan 4, a great shoe to resell until Nike manages to kill it. You know, like eventually they're going to kill that colorway, just like they killed it once. But the Jordan 4 right now is still a good shoe. It's still a good silhouette. The Bread 4 coming up, that's going to be a good come up. If you get those, you're going to do great. So it really depends on the silhouette and what is now trending in the market. Like certain sizes are great. Like any size that's like a size 11 and a half, a size 14. Those are great sizes now. In those days, there are certain sizes that were the best. Anything like size 6 to 8, because a certain segment of the population was buying that. And they stopped buying them and he killed that market. I don't want to say the segment because I'm going to sound, these days, you don't know who's going to get offended. But a certain segment of the population was buying certain sizes and we knew they were getting them. So everywhere you went, you couldn't find those sizes 6 to 8. You couldn't get those sizes because we know we were getting them. You know, so this is how this works. You just have to know, you constantly have to be up to date on right now what is hot and get that. And it's not easy to do. You have to have your ears and your eyes. And now you have to add on to the problem, fakes. This has completely destroyed this market. Because back in those days, if you sold fake, you were excommunicated. If you wore fakes, you were killed. These days, it is welcome, like with open hands. I mean, so that's this. So I don't know if I answer your question, but this is the kind of stuff that's happening now. You know, as far as like quantifying the question that you asked. So basically, this is what I can say.
I know you obviously have written a lot about fakes, and it's something that is, you know, a big part of what you've like researched, spend time on. Two questions there. Was there fewer fakes back in 2009, 2010? If so, why? Or what has changed between now and then? And then also, like, maybe for someone that doesn't know, like, how do you roughly tell? You know what I mean? Like, do you have to really be someone that is looking at something super intensely to tell whether it's fake? And it probably depends on the quality of the fake, but maybe just, can you walk me through, like, how has that changed? You know, like, are there more fakes now versus 10 years ago? Why is that? Why isn't that? Will that continue? Like, how has that evolved?
Yeah. Well, you know, in 2009, 2010, there weren't that many fakes. You know, and then the fakes there were like blatant. You could tell. I mean, you didn't have to be an expert to recognize a fake. But then something happened in 2009, 10 that completely changed the landscape of the sneaker industry. So you had what they call them early release sneakers. So there's a guy by the name of Air Randy. He will send a bunch of pictures before the shoe released. Air Randy, Marquis sold. They will have the shoes early and they will be selling them. And at the time, we all thought those were legitimate until the Concord 11 fiasco. So we didn't know. So I bought actually shoes from Taobao. Taobao was my place to go to. Taobao, add on to that. So Taobao, I bought stuff from Taobao. They look legitimate. But for some reason, I'm like, how can they get all these shoes? So I'll get them and I'll send them to Fly Club. Sold a couple. And then I remember one day I bought a pair of Jordan 11 Cool Grays, sent them to Fly Club, and Fly Club sent it back to me and say, hey, we are not saying your shoes is authentic, but we're not saying they are fake either. We just can't sell it. That's when, I'll be like, okay, something is up. So what happened was that's when fakes graduated, and they went to they were called at the time the 98.9%ers. They were pretty much 99% close to the authentic. They were still fakes. And the way I understand it is this: these people got molds. They got the molds and they got all the stuff. They got equipment. They remake these sneakers. Now there's a website now that does it, and he shows buyers the shoes that he's making, how many he's making, and they can't wait to get their hands on it. So to answer your question, back then fakes were not that popular. There weren't that many, but now it has been accepted. So you no longer get called out for wearing fakes. Nobody cares because they say, screw Nike. Nike doesn't want to give us shoes anyway, so we're going to go and get the fake ones because they're cheaper and they are pretty much the same material. The shoes are some shoes that I show you, it's like you really have to dig. I'll spend sometimes 2 hours just to identify some small details. But as far as recognizing a fake, the first thing is always the smell. For some reason, up to this day, they've still used the worst kind of glue. So when you take a sniff, it smells so bad. And the boxes are also a big deal. The boxes are usually cheaper boxes, and they also always have this ashy look to them. So that's the way to tell, but the smell is terrible. But again, once you wear the shoe 1 or 2 times, nobody cares anymore. They look great. The quality is amazing. I've been approached by several fake shoes that sent me fake shoes to review. I recently did a Kobe Bruce Lee. I put the shoes on, I went to the court. People were like, yo, I want those, man. I'm like, they're like, yo, I want those shoes. So this is crazy. And how much the guy was selling the shoe for is $140. Okay. That's a fake shoe for $140. That means he knows that he's selling quality shoes. So it's easy, so it's to the point where nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Well, and it's the thing where maybe it's not, depending on how you look at it, maybe it's not, it's tough. I was about to say maybe it's not a bad thing, but if I was working Nike, be like, how dare you say that? You know what I mean? If a kid just wants to wear those shoes and he or she doesn't care that much, maybe it's one way to get access to it. But also I know it's there's a lot of business at stake, right? Companies like eBay or StockX talk about authenticity guarantee, and it's a selling point for them. If there's a reason why they invest in authentication, is however many millions of dollars they're spending on that. They have a process, they have a badging system. Part of the Nike lawsuit against StockX, or was a perceived lawsuit, was the accusation that they were selling fakes knowingly and stuff, right? So it's interesting to me because I don't know how it will evolve, right? I see a selling point between marketplaces. If I was a buyer, some buyers might not care, might just want to buy fakes. But for some buyers, it's very important in terms of trust, right? If I feel for whatever reason, this marketplace is actually selling bad quality stuff, and some marketplaces have that reputation more than others, that will make me move my dollars from here to there. So there's a lot of money at stake and reputation at stake for these businesses, right?
Yeah. Well, the problem is eBay used to be the place where you sold a lot of shoes. And at the time, the feedback system was incredible because that really mattered a lot. But then when StockX came in the picture, they completely buried eBay. eBay is really struggling to make ends meet. And I just recently wrote an article about eBay because they claim all the shoes on their, especially branded shoes like Jordans, are authentic. I was just looking at a Jordan 4 Black Cat the other day. Just on the first page, they had 9 pairs that were fake. And I'm sitting there thinking, how can you call yourself a legitimate marketplace and that can escape your gaze? I'm not even looking. It's not like I went searching for this stuff. So, this is why people are migrating. And now StockX is also running into trouble because I think the authentication process, they're receiving a lot of shoes a day, and some are gonna slip through the cracks. The fakes are getting better, man. So it's a tough. I wouldn't put myself in a place like this because authentication is a pain in the neck. If you're receiving every day about 500 pair of shoes, you better believe that at least 5 or 10% are going to slip through the cracks, and those are going to be the fake ones. So yes, the selling point is great to say, well, we're selling authentic, but this is a dangerous place because people these days are quick to jump on eBay, on YouTube, and then put you on blast, which you've done to StockX several times.
Well, and I think too, like the brands obviously don't like it, right? Like there's no one at Adidas or Nike or Puma, New Balance, etc., who's like, I'm cool with that, and which is why the lawsuit was partially motivated by an accusation that they're selling fakes. And it kind of makes me think, like, you know, you talked about starting reselling at a time period when there was eBay, but there wasn't StockX, there wasn't even social media platforms to sell this stuff, and now you have a series of marketplaces, not just StockX. You have new ones coming in. I was talking to someone at Poison the other day who's expanding to the US. There's many others, even smaller ones. And I wonder how the relationship between these secondary marketplaces has evolved in terms of their relationship with these big brands. Obviously, there's an element to which hype and resale value gets the word out. It's like brand awareness, brand equity for a Nike, but also they're missing out on the incremental profit. There's elements where, if fakes are being sold on these marketplaces, theoretically, that doesn't look good for them. There's a frenemy attitude there. Maybe Nike would want the relationship to change. What's your take on how the relationship between these sneaker brands and these resale marketplaces, how has that changed in the last 10 years? Where do you see it going as well?
I think Nike actually uses this sneaker marketplaces as a gauge, because if you notice, what happened is this: they've seen how much people are willing to pay for certain shoes, and they keep releasing them over and over. You see what they've done to the Pandas? They killed the market because they realized people were paying top dollars for those, so they kept on doing what? Restock, restock, restock. So Nike loves these marketplaces. Free data. You can see what's selling. Hey, produce more. So to them, to Nike, is like it's a perfect storm for them. They love it. I mean, they absolutely love it. And now they know people are gonna pay this much for. Okay, you know what? Why don't we produce more of these shoes? You're gonna see that, for example, the Charles Barkley, the Air Max CB2 94, they released that 2 years ago, and they're releasing them again. Why? You wonder why? Because they are looking to see, hey, listen, this shoe is trending. People are paying $300. Let's make more. So they're loving it. Like, brands are loving this thing because they can see what's happening and they have an eye into the market. With eBay, it was a little hard because you can still track the data, but here it's easier. But what I'm more interested in is the relationship between retailers and these marketplaces. Because I do believe, again, I'm not accusing anybody, but I do believe that some of these retailers are secretly selling their inventory on these marketplaces. And nobody knows it because they're buying those things for a wholesale and they are selling them there because they can be tracked. You can't track who's selling on StockX, not like on eBay where you see the seller's name. So I'm sure a lot of these retailers are secretly moving inventory on these marketplaces, because I can't believe a shoe that is $180 retail is selling for $120. And I'm like, who's selling this? There's other reasons why this is happening, but one of the reasons I believe is that some of these retailers are using this place to dump their inventory, that excess stuff that they can't sell.
So can you walk me through this? And obviously we don't have to mention a specific retailer, but let's take like a retailer that buys their shoes from a wholesale distributor. They buy X amount, which is calculated based on projected demand, where it's like, okay, I'm going to buy this many for my store because I predict a sell-through rate and I expect this to work out. I guess to understand what you're saying, would a retailer then, if after they've already ordered the shoes and they see that it's not selling as good as they had expected, and they have, I don't know, 30% inventory left, they'd still sell it at a lower cost than that they are currently displaying at their store, because that's better than not selling it at all, which is a possibility if they don't have a place to put the inventory like a StockX. Is that correct? Did I describe that situation correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's absolutely correct. I think they're doing it more because I remember. Again, I remember I used to go to this place in where I live in Maryland, and I used to go there and buy the shoes, and I would go turn around and sell them on StockX or whatever, eBay, and sometimes on my own website. And I began to see like a pattern that their prices were much lower than StockX before. And then at some point, all their prices were the same as StockX. So I'm like, they're looking at StockX and they are pricing their items in accordance with what they see. And then next thing you knew, you couldn't find those shoes anymore that we thought were like gems. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm thinking, yeah, they are probably selling them themselves straight on StockX, and nobody can track these because it's anonymous. So they can use somebody, a third person, like somebody else just to sell it. Nobody knows. So I'm sure this is happening. And if I was a retailer, tell you the truth, I'll do the same thing. So they can't be blamed for it. Because I don't want stuff sitting here if I know that I can sell them. Because a lot of times these retailers, they have not really worked on their website, so they can't draw a lot of traffic. So they know that everybody's going to StockX, so they're going to use StockX to sell their items. So that's the problem, because they haven't really invested in their website the way they should. They don't. Their website are not attractive. Like, I don't get up and go to Foot Locker unless I'm really looking for the shoe calendar. I don't go on Foot Locker for what? Like, they don't have anything to bring the customer back. This is why websites like our website, where we write sneakers, we talk sneakers, people come on those websites and they want to read the information and they want to listen to our recommendation, because they realize, hey, they're not only talking sneakers, they can tell us where to go buy the stuff. Now, these retailers, they could do that, but they don't, because they don't listen to people like me, because they feel like, well, we've been doing this for 20 years, so what are you going to tell us? But you have to have something to bring the customer back beside your shoes that you're selling, and they're not doing that.
Well, also you have this sort of macro trend where retail locations are challenged in a way. You see some stores shutting down. Let's just take malls, right? The idea of someone going to a mall in 2005 is a different situation than someone going to a mall now. There was a lot of room for a Foot Locker in 2006 when everybody was going to malls and people, like, e-commerce was just less of a thing. So, right? So if you think about, like, when someone says retail, it just makes me think that there's a distinction, right? Like, there's a difference between the Foot Lockers versus like a super hyped store in New York that everybody wants to go to anyway, versus like Tony's store, and maybe it's nothing special. Because I think there's a different situation, right? Some of those are struggling more than others. There's room for, and also even like let's say regional stuff, right? I was talking to someone saying that, if you live in North Dakota, you'd probably be willing to pay a higher price for like Panda Dunks if you live in North Dakota versus if you live in LA, where there's probably like 100 places you can get them. Maybe there's only one or two stores in North Dakota, right? So I feel like there's like a lot of nuance to what retail means, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because it really depends on the region, and it really, like you say. But again, with StockX now, everything is like, StockX is a one-stop shop. If I live in North Dakota, I don't even have to go anywhere. I just go on StockX and get the item and it's gonna be delivered to my door. So so StockX is like filling that void. They found a need and they filled it, and it's working perfect for them. Goat is doing the same thing. eBay is the one struggling. So yeah.
Well, I think also to your point about that, I was listening to an interview with the StockX CEO. I think he was on CBS or something in December and November, saying how he wanted to make sure when he was being interviewed on the news that, hey, we're not just about the hype releases. Like, X% of our sales are at retail, if not below retail. And I was talking to someone else about this, and it seems like, if you were on StockX in 2017, 18, you're probably like pretty intense of a sneakerhead. Now, from what you've seen, is StockX becoming a place where it's just an e-com site? You don't have to be a crazy sneaker interested person, but is it able to expand the target audience of buyers to a broader audience. Is that something you see happening? From what you've observed.
That's what they're after. I think these people are after Amazon. They want to gain as much market ground as possible. They are doing it to eBay, and that's where they are really heading at. But they started off with this hype stuff. So I don't know how easy that's going to be to break away from it, but that's where they are headed. I know a lot of things are being sold on there, like the Sambas are being sold on there now for pretty good, like good grip. But this is where they want to be. But I think it would take some time and some convincing, because the average dad and mom don't go on StockX unless they want to buy their son a pair of Jordan Retro. Most people are still like Amazon shoppers or eBay, to say the least. StockX has not quite, I don't have access to their data, but I think it's going to be a little harder to convince the average Joe to go on there to buy something.
Well, but also that's the story that they could sell the public markets if they want to go public, right? It's like, hey, what's the growth prospects of StockX? We're not just about hype sneaker people. We're about becoming the next e-commerce platform for, a wide variety of things.
If they want to do that, they need to make some changes. See, StockX doesn't accept shoes that come in like broken boxes, and like this is, if you want to appeal to like everybody, you gotta be able to sell everything. They're still pretty particular about, you got your shoes and your new. They have to have a division for like used. If they really want to do that, then they have to be willing to like be more than just like we only want on broken shoes and on broken boxes, and so they gotta be able to do that. I think they still haven't done that yet, and most people still think of StockX as a hype place where people sneakers that are being sold on there are like the typical Yeezys or Nikes and Jordan Retros. But I think they are getting ground, and they're gonna eventually get there with the right tools and with the right people around them. They will get there sooner than I think.
Taib, I just want to say, like, time is flying by. I feel like we should have more conversations in the future, and I feel like there's so many things I still want to talk to you about. But maybe to kind of like narrow down a bit, because you don't have all the time in the world. But what kind of stuff, looking at 2024, whether it's particular shoes, whether it's companies you're watching, whether it's trends, what stuff are you like really excited about that you want to track in 2024? Maybe it's like the rise of smaller brands. Maybe it's a particular segment of footwear. Maybe it's a particular release. Maybe it's a designer. Kind of an open-ended question here, but just want to know, like, what stuff are you following and you're excited about these days?
Man, honestly, like I've not been excited about this shoe stuff anymore. Like it's more boring to me. But the one thing that got me excited the other day was when I saw those Snoop Dogg's Skechers basketball shoes. That got me excited, because I'm like, whoa, this look nice. Like this a little change. Skechers having a basketball shoe. But the best guy to talk to on this is like Chris. Chris is phenomenal when it comes to like really understanding like small brand and how they're making strides. But honestly, like I just want me a good, comfortable shoe. And well, you know what? I have been looking at the On brand, because I bought their shoes about 4 years ago and I fell in love. So I'm still trying to see how well this brand is going to do, because now you see their stuff from Foot Locker, and that, like Chris would say, may not be a good sign, because when you start taking your stuff to Foot Locker and they start marking those things down to like $29.99, it kind of killed the look of the brand. They've done with the Adoras. I mean, you walk in there, the Adora is an amazing brand, and Foot Locker sell the Adora for $9.99. So if I'm like On, I will not put my stuff in a Foot Locker. I'll keep it straight on my website. So that's the brand that I was looking at. Now the Hoka brand, I've not really done a lot of research on it. Again, that's a Chris question. I'm more into just like the sneaker resale and stuff like that. But this Skechers got me excited. They got me excited because honestly, I feel like Nike's shoes are too redundant. It's still always the same silhouette. There's nothing exciting. They've done all the stories. I don't know what else they can do to kind of get people excited. I just don't feel like it's exciting anymore. Now, at some point, Under Armour was really growing strong with the Steph Currys. I love the stories. Every shoe, especially on the first and second signature shoes, they were amazing. And then I guess they ran out of things to talk about, and that kind of died out. But Under Armour is also a brand that I look at, especially I love their shoes because, again, they've given me some shoes, and functionality-wise, they are amazing. So I want to see what they have in the future, But as far as like me being excited, honestly, I'm not too excited about these shoes anymore. It's not exciting. I'm trying to find something exciting to talk about, and it's not there.
Well, I know you obviously follow basketball quite a bit and basketball shoes. And to me, it seems like things are heating up from that perspective, right? Like you see Shaq with Reebok basketball becoming,
Oh yeah,
I guess, yeah, more aggressive. And what's interesting to me, like I talked about this with some folks, but all these like Chinese brands, right? Like Anta 361 Degrees getting Nikola
yeah,
Jokic, and Li Ning with Jimmy Butler.
yeah.
It seems to me that like from a basketball perspective, like there's a more of an open playing field than there has been before. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with you. But it's just, again, you have to understand the American consumer, man. They are sold, what they have there for it is Nike. If it's not Nike, they're not wearing it. So it's like, I mean, you go to a basketball court, right? 90% of the shoes are like Nikes. And it's just all the athletes, they want to sign with Nike. Ja Morant, like Devin Booker. So you have like Jokic. Jokic is not a typical guy. Like
True.
Jimmy Butler, Nike's not going after Jimmy Butler. They don't need him. Like all the superstars, they're all going to what? They're all going to Nike. So, like, yes, I'm smaller brands are making a stride, but it's gonna be hard to really dethrone the Swiss brand, man. It's just they're here to stay. It's just, it's just hard. It's just really hard. Like, well, Anta has done some great things with like Klay Thompson. And there's another guy, I forgot his name. He plays for the Brooklyn Nets. Oh my gosh, I forgot his name. He also has his own brand, which I talked about on my website for a little bit, but then there was nothing. People were not interested. So, I stopped kind of writing about it. But yeah, smaller brands are going to have a harder time, but I feel like it's still a good place. I mean, they can still get a little bit of a loyal following, but it's nothing that's going to really disturb or disrupt Nike. And one tried, and one was the greatest thing to like challenge Nike, and they still failed at some point.
And that's a whole story in of itself, which for another episode. But and I think also if you're a small brand, like if you can go from like 0.5% market share to 1%, that's still like doubling your market share. So that's already a win, right? You don't need to beat Nike to be successful and like grow.
Yeah.
Ty, I know we're running out of time here, so I want to just close with the same last two questions I close these episodes with. The first being, where can people find you on social media, the URL to their website, etc. And the second, what's one last message you'd like to leave with the audience?
Okay. Well, people can find me on I have my YouTube account is probably my only social media that I really use a lot, and my Facebook page is House of Kicks, and my YouTube page is Taib Salami, Tayyib, and last name Salami, Salami, and my website. Now, you want to get in touch with me, go on my website. I constantly put content on there, probably like daily basis, unless I'm really busy. It's houseofkicks.com, HOUSAKICKS.com. And last message, honestly, I just want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk, because I always love doing this thing. So yeah, so I don't really have anything else inspiring to say, but thank you for having me on this platform. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Neustreet X podcast. You can learn more about the guest in the show notes and learn more about Neustreet at neustreet.com. Please make sure to like, follow, subscribe across YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and more. Thank you so much. See you next time.